After countless hours of reading medical textbooks, I finally achieved the prestigious title every little girl dreams of. Nursing aide at a nursing home. So glamorous, I know. My time working there was short-lived, not because I got fired or the job was too hard. It was difficult, but because I no longer felt safe. After everything I've witnessed on that job, I'm honestly not sure I'm eligible for heaven anymore. They started me out on night shift. I hadn't been there long when me and my co-slave Sally started seeing things. And no, I don't mean the ghost of dead patients. I know what we saw was much more than ghosts, but to this day I don't know a damn thing about them. My fourth night on the shift was what I now believe to be my first encounter. One of the patients, Mrs. Porter, had, shit the bed. Me and Sally were tasked with cleaning up Mrs. Porter's mess. It certainly wasn't easy, but eventually we got it done. The whole time there was a strange noise in the room. Faint, but there. It was sort of like a motor, but soft, if that makes sense. I assumed it was some sort of machinery messing up. Sally, however, took notice. "What in the world is that noise?" she asked. "Probably just something in here acting up," I told her. "Well, that's not good. We need to figure out what's making that noise." Before I could answer, the door opened. It was Michelle, the head nurse. "Rachel, they need you down the hall. Logan's throwing his poop again." I dealt with Logan's outrage, bless my heart. Sally stayed back to find out what was making the mysterious noise, or more likely to get out of Logan's little game. Either way, I'm glad she did. On our next smoke break, Sally explained to me where the noise came from. "It was coming from under the bed," she told me. "What was it?" I asked. "This sounds crazy, but it was a cat." "You're telling me the noise was a cat purring?" "You're pulling my leg." "No, Rachel, I'm dead serious." I hadn't known her long, but I could tell she wasn't joking. "What did it look like?" I asked. "It had bright blue eyes, white fur, a bit of gray pattern on its legs, maybe its tail and face. I'm thinking it must be one of these expensive cats." "Siamese?" I suggested. "You think?" "Well, they match the description, but I'd have to see it myself to say." "What do you do with it?" "That's the strange part. I went to grab my phone from the window so I could send you the pic and ask for help, but when I squatted back down, it was gone." Hearing that while looking at the dark parking lot through her thick puffs of cigarette smoke made me shiver. In my fear, I could have sworn I saw the silhouette of a cat dash through the parking lot and vanish into the night. I didn't tell Sally because I immediately chalked it up to paranoia. The next day, Mrs. Porter passed away. Sally called me in distress, saying she let the cat kill Mrs. Porter, that she could have stopped it if she'd only looked for the cat. I explained to her that the cat couldn't have done anything to cause it, and it was in no way her fault. She told me she couldn't sleep because the purring was stuck in her head. Eventually we agreed a little therapy would be good. I told her I'd cover her shift that night, so she could rest. She thanked me and said she'd talk to me soon. The break room that night was particularly talkative. Being the new girl, not many of the workers chatted with me, but I'd overhear most of the gossip all the same. I was sitting alone at my usual table in the corner of the break room. I was trying to read, but I could effortlessly hear every syllable of Michelle's conversation, despite her sitting on the opposite side of the room. She was telling everyone that she saw a man wearing a very, very expensive-looking suit walking down the hall. She claimed she went after him, but once he turned the corner, he was gone. The only reason I gave her story any thought was because it matched Sally's story. Expensive suit, expensive cat. It became less believable when she described the suit to be a blinding white color with golden brooches on the sleeves. She said she never saw him from the front, but she did say he was wearing a white fedora with a golden band around the crown. Most people didn't believe her story at all. A few believed her full-heartedly. I just believed Sally. But since the two stories lined up, I kinda believed Michelle. Under no other circumstances would I do that. The more skeptical of us went straight to the security footage. I found out later that night that there was no man wearing a white and gold suit to be seen on any of the cameras. On my next shift, seemingly everyone was in complete disbelief of Michelle's story. "Cameras don't cover everything," became the single most repeated phrase in the whole nursing home. More impressive still was that Michelle was the only person saying it. It was once again a talkative break room. I was sitting at the same table finishing my chicken salad. At Michelle's table, the ongoing debate took an angry turn. Michelle was furious. She didn't touch her tea once. As they barraged her with smart-ass statements about her story, she erupted like an old volcano. "Cameras don't cover everything!" she screamed. "There's no way he could have got past all of them, honey," one of the nurses told her. Then the others all repeated some versions of the same phrase, trying to sound intelligent. "Y'all better leave me alone. I know what I saw, and I know them GD cameras don't cover everything, damn it!" I held back laughter. I couldn't help it. She said GD with a red face and then proceeded to actually cuss. They didn't let up, though. So she snatched her iced tea, then stormed out. It took less than 30 seconds for them to start running their mouths. They were saying how stupid she was, how crazy, how much she lies, and especially how childish she acts. Despite my restrained laugh, I felt really bad for Michelle. She may be annoying sometimes, but she's not a bad person, and they're just tearing her apart behind her back. "She's telling the truth," I stood up and told them, unable to stop myself. They all looked at me in shock of what the new girl had just done to herself. Without thinking it over, I told them Sally's cat story. I really shouldn't have. "A cat? Really?" one of them said, shaking his head and standing up to leave. One by one they all followed, giving me looks of disgust. I sat back down and laid my head on the table. I needed to cry, particularly from embarrassment, but mostly from guilt of telling Sally's story without permission. My next shift, Sally was back, thank God. Michelle was gone. She was switched to day shift. It was a relief for me because Michelle was 100% by the book. Ashley, the nurse who replaced her, was 3 months pregnant. I assumed she'd be taking it easy. I was wrong. This woman was a gripper, but unlike Michelle, she was fair with us. She put me and Sally together for most jobs. We were taking our second smoke break when Sally laid out the plan. She told me she was going to slip out during lunch and look through all the footage. I expressed my concerns of her getting called, but she didn't care. She was hell-bent on finding something. As usual, I was sitting at my preferred table. Sally had successfully slipped out, just like she said. I was finishing my salad when I spotted Ashley walking over. I'm so screwed, I thought, as if I really had any part in Sally's plan. "Rachel, right?" Ashley asked. "Yep," I said nervously. "You said your friend saw something in Mrs. She paused. Porter's room?" "Yeah, she saw a cat. Siamese, we think," I explained. "Where is she? Doesn't she sit with you?" "She's in the restroom, but she'll be back," I said. "Do you mind if I sit here till she gets back?" "No, I don't mind at all." After a few painfully awkward minutes of small talk, Sally entered the break room, walking briskly past the pop machine. I could tell by the look on her face something went wrong. She made her way over and returned to her seat. "Is everything okay?" Ashley asked. "Yeah, I'm fine," Sally said. "Well, if you're comfortable, I want to hear your story about the cat." Sally told Ashley the story in great detail, then hesitated before adding that she'd seen it again, right before she came back. "In the bathroom?" Ashley asked. "In the surveillance room, actually. I wanted to find proof so people stop being so skeptical," Sally explained. "It's okay. I understand. I saw it too." She paused. "Just not the cat." "Have y'all heard Michelle's story?" "Yes, and we believe it," Sally answered for both of us. "Good. 'Cause it's real. We can discuss that later. For now, let's see if we can catch that cat," Ashley said, standing up. With no objection, Sally and I abandoned our seats and took in behind her. We charged into the room, just in time to see a white blur dash under the computer table. Ashley hurried over, dropping to her knees. Upon seeing her, the cat let out a guttural growl as if it were 900 pounds instead of 20. Ashley scrambled back in shock. The cat bolted past her and out of the open door. Sally chased after it, and I chased after her. We barely caught up in time to see the cat run into Mr. Henderson's room. I entered the room out of breath. Sally was looking at Mr. Henderson with watery eyes. When I got control of my breath, I understood why. There was a loud yet soft purring coming from under the bed. Sally broke her trance and swiftly looked under the bed. When she did, the purring noise relocated to the bathroom. "What the hell?" Sally said. We raced into the bathroom, but the purr only dwindled to a faint, almost unrecognizable noise. We went back out and determined it was coming from inside Mr. Henderson's nightstand. Sally hurried over and jerked the drawer open. Too shocked to react, she only gasped. Inside the drawer lay a bloody brown rat carcass. Ashley finally caught up to us. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "What?" I asked. "I watched you all on the cameras, and there was no cat. You were chasing nothing." "Holy shit," I said, stunned. "I guess cameras really don't cover everything." Sally, still lost for words, motioned Ashley over to the nightstand. "Take a look in there." Ashley walked over and looked into the open drawer. "What is it?" she asked. "A dead rat." "What? Where?" she asked, looking closer. Sally walked over to point it out, but it was gone, blood and all. We went back to the break room where Ashley told us what she saw. "Back on day shift, I took care of Mrs. Porter a lot. The day she passed, she thanked me for everything I'd done for her, and told me that her time was near, that the man and his cat had been to see her. I asked her who the man was, and I'll never forget how she looked at me. Emotionless. 'No one knows,' she told me. I didn't take her seriously. I thought she was just losing it. But not even 2 hours later, she died." Ashley briefly fell silent. "When I got to her room, a nurse and a couple aides were already in there. I just took a seat on the bench down the hall and thought about our last conversation. Probably would have cried it out right there, but I felt like I was being watched. I looked around, and just like Michelle described, there was a man in a white and gold suit at the end of the hall. He was staring at me. I can't say for certain, but from that distance it looked like his eyes were completely white. I may have imagined it, but I'm pretty sure he grinned at me before turning around and walking out of sight." "Was he wearing the fedora?" Sally asked. "Yeah." The next shift, day shift, Mr. Henderson died. Upon hearing the news from Sally, I felt a screw or two loosen in my head. Any part of me that thought this could have all been a collective prank was gone right there. The rules had changed for me. My perception of the world was shattered. Even now, I can't see the world as natural. I believe nature is only one layer of this planet, and there's still 3 more below it, not to mention God knows how many above it. With Mr. Henderson's passing, rumors about a guardian angel and his spectral cat blossomed throughout the nursing home. Ashley told Michelle, and it went from there. By the end of the week, the myth had grown to a legend. The majority of the news stories going around were absurdly fake. Both the coloring of the man's suit and the cat seemed to change with every story. Some stories he was old, others he was young. One aide, Betsy, even proclaimed she saw a black man wearing nothing but his underwear. Some workers went so far as to say Logan knew of the man and the cat and only threw his feces to keep them away. While I'd love to believe that, I've seen firsthand that the man just really loves throwing shit. After a week of hearing all the silly rumors and not actually seeing anything, I began to feel at ease again, let my guard down even. Like most things in life, my next encounter happened when I least expected it. Sometime around 4 a.m. I was sent to Mr. Vance's room to turn him and change his bed fittings, if necessary. It usually was. As I approached the room, I could hear Mr. Vance yelling something. I rushed in. Mr. Vance looked up at me out of breath, but managed to utter, "Help!" The door slammed behind me. I turned around and was met with wide eyes. My stomach curled and I wanted to puke. Just like Ashley said, he grinned at my fearful and disgusted expression. I could hear a familiar purring from behind me. The man moved toward me and I scurried back, tripping on the furry body underneath my feet. I jumped up, staggering to the backside of the room. The man and his cat creeped toward me, the grin and purring still very much prevalent. I backed into the wall and the man reached out, stroking my chin while the cat rubbed up against my legs. "Darling, you know not what you see." His breath smelled of mold and rot, with a hint of vermin. "Please don't hurt me," I pleaded. his grin wide and revealing sharp teeth. "I'm not here to hurt you or the patients. I simply have a duty to make sure they all find their place." I wanted to ask what he meant by that, but I was too afraid. "I need you to wear this for me," he said, pulling off his golden tie. He put it around my head and had it fastened in seconds like some sort of mad magician. He leaned in close to me and I could smell his vile breath again. "It's in your best interest not to remove that," he said, before walking away. His purring cat followed. "Last chance to accept my offer, Mr. Vance. As I said, you will die either way. It's only a matter of what's next for you." I could barely make out the words due to the tie around my ears. "No, you devil! In the name of God, the Holy Spirit, leave me!" Mr. Vance shouted. "So be it." I heard what sounded like a briefcase shutting, and Mr. Vance struggling to breathe. The door opened and closed. Mr. Vance gasped for air desperately. I wanted to take off my blindfold, but thought about what the man said and resisted my urge until the room grew silent. I struggled to loosen the knot he had tied and slid it off my head. I screamed. Mr. Vance was staring right at me, wide eyes and even wider mouth. When the aides found me, I was curled up in the floor crying. The golden tie had rotted away in my hands. Enormous guilt pinned me to the floor. I felt like I was destined for hell, and maybe I am. I couldn't stop crying until Sally dragged me outside and put a cigarette in my mouth. That was the last time I set foot in that nursing home. Aside from Sally, Rachel, and yourself, whoever may be reading this, I've told no one this story.